in the background.
Just you need to look good. Hello.
It's recording. So
It
you
is
have to
too.
you have to put on your
Are we on
face.
mute? Yeah.
I don't know. No, that's
Tiffany, yes.
Tiffany on mute.
Oh,
That's not
Tiffany's
us.
on mute. No, we're not on mute.
We're good. We're good. So
Tiffany, if you can hear us or someone can hear us, do you want to raise a hand or say something? We've got some participants coming on. We can hear you. Woo.
it's exciting.
I was just saying, I know Deanne woke up this morning and thought, Yahoo, I've got a webinar to do today.
Yes, I did.
No, this is like super exciting because we have joined the webinar today into Small Business Week. And Small Business Week it's a Queensland government initiative, I think, isn't it? And look,
Queensland or federal, one of the two.
no, I think it's Queensland. I think it's a Queensland government initiative, and look, all kudos to them because they actually do a great job, I think, of trying to put on events and trying to tap into the business community and see where they think there's some needs or training and opportunities and all sorts of things. So if you don't already tap into Queensland government, small business and the resources and the webinars and seminars and things like that, make sure you do, because they do have some really good things there. And they're also always really open for feedback. So if there's any sort of courses or programs or seminars and things that you think they should be putting on for the community, the business community, they're always really open for that too.
Yeah. And I think, for us being able to run webinars like this that are really aimed at that small business market, we can make the assumptions till cows come home about what we think small business is wanting to know. But the beauty of our webinars is we do better flying by the seat of our pants and off the cuff. So if there are questions that you want us to answer throughout the webinar, please put them in the Q&A section down the bottom on your webinar screen. And we're happy to sort of go through them as much as we can today. Pivot so that we're making sure that the content that we're going through is not only what we think that you need, but it is actually hitting the mark of what small business is wanting out of a HR Basics webinar.
Yeah, I agree. So we've still got people joining us going with the numbers. So that's
It's like one of those lotto wheels.
So they're going round and round. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes until we get started officially. So one of the things that I went to, which wasn't in Small Business Week, but it was sort of in the lead up to, was Meet the Buyer, which is when they had some of the big companies, and it was a diverse range of companies from construction to what else was there? There was sort of lots of different sort of constructions and social services, Queensland Health, and you had an opportunity to go in and you had like I think it was 5 minutes that you got to select
like
who you'd
speed
like to,
dating, but speed buying.
It seriously was like, and you got 3 people that you got. There was a whole list of who you could talk to. You got to choose who you would like to, and 3 of them got selected. But the bonus is that if someone didn't turn up or they had a free session, they put up a green flag and you could jump in. So I had a personal challenge to speak to every single buyer, and I achieved it because I like those types of games.
I could just see when the green flag went up what would happen. Elbows out, but you achieved it. It was good.
Do you know, and it was great to talk to some of the bigger buyers. Probably services, we do a little bit of work for larger organizations, but we do more for smaller businesses. But part of the networking, so while people were waiting to talk, they did some great food. They had food vans that had done meals and things that you could help yourself to, but you have to pay. Bonus.
Excellent.
And so I got to meet other business owners and things like that. So I thought it was.
So that was purely an initiative of Small Business Week or Small Business Month?
Well, it was just Small Business Month. It was earlier on in the month with it, and it was easy. So yeah, as I said, just make sure that you do keep an eye out on those sorts of events, and even if some of the buyers are not necessarily your market, just getting that connection with some people and having a chat, and yeah, it was really good. It was a good night. They did it really well, I thought.
Okay.
Anyway, all right, without further ado, we've still got some people joining us, but I think we'll just crack on.
Start on time.
Because I've written a couple of notes. My first one is that,
so unlike you, Phoebe. It's very much unlike you, but to go forth and conquer.
Well, Dee's been super busy, so she said this is up to you to organise, Phoebe. And then like, I'm not very good with PowerPoint. Are you allowed to say that as an HR person? We're meant to like PowerPoints and do training and things, but it's just not my friend. So I did have to do a bit of chicken school to work out how I could organise for you to do more talking than me through the seminar.
Now they see that does sound. Now I'm seeing the connection here.
And the first thing I wrote down was that we understand that business resources, small business resources are precious, and that's, you know, time and money. So my concept then was to let Dee do the heavy lifting and really going to cover what we think is the essentials. So if you're really going to be putting any of your time or any money into HR, you know, what we think is like, this is, you know,
minimum.
You need to do this, you know, to stay within the speed zone. We use
Stay out of jail.
Stay out of jail. You know, if you want to drive, you know, 200 kilometers down the highway with no seatbelt, then absolutely don't do this. Or, but you know, we can give you some ideas as to where we think you should be focusing your attention on it. Interestingly, I then drafted all of that, and then I thought I better read and see what we actually said we were going to cover in the webinar.
Now
so
that does sound like
yeah, not a strategy that I would recommend, because, you know, I did get a few heart palpitations while I was like, you know, what are we meant to be talking about? But I'm inadvertently, I believe that I covered off on all the main topics. So
you did. Look at you go.
Look at me go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Dee some questions about some key HR functions and get her pearls of wisdom as to, is this really something, is it nice to have, or is this a must have, something that you really need to have in place? So, and I'm going to start right.
And I have no pre-warning of the questions, so you're going to get completely off the cuff today.
Yeah, blank answers maybe.
No blank answers.
No
You're going to get the
blank
honest answers,
The
which
honest
is
one.
good.
So the first one is application forms. So one of the things that we say is have an application form for when you get people applying for roles. Is this something that's just a nice to have, or why would you want it?
I'd really like to say it's a nice to have, but I think we've moved past that. It's now an essential to have. And there's a number of reasons why having an application form is essential. And it's probably for reasons that most small business owners haven't actually thought of. And it's not until you actually get your bum kicked in the commission for something that you realize the importance of something so small like an application form. So essential because A, it helps validate what's on the resume. So you want to make sure A equals B. So what they're saying on the application form equals a resume, and they haven't just Googled and copied somebody else's resume and put their name on the front of it. B, it also gives you the opportunity to ask more pointed questions in terms of an employee's, say, physical ability to do the job, if they have any modifications that may need to be made. It also allows you to collect further details about qualifications. But more importantly, and I guess, you know, I play in a field where I deal with the Fair Work Commission on a daily basis in conferences, general protections, unfair dismissals, when things,
all the fun stuff,
when the poo hits the fan is usually when I come in. And it's employees now have the ability to say things, not because they should, but because they can. Right. And so I've read a lot of test cases, a lot of case history. It's very boring. Nighttime in my house is very, very boring. But all it's going to take is for an employee to say, you didn't give me the job because I was Indian. And then you might be sitting there going, well, how am I going to know if there's Indian? So they put a photo on their resume. All right. So it may not have even registered to the employer that the person was Indian. May not have even been a consideration, but it has anything to do with the employee being able to say that that's what they thought. If you've got these other layers in there, like an application form, you can demonstrate that you applied consistency to all applicants, whether they were black, white, brindle, English, Arabic, whatever, it doesn't matter. 60, 30, 18.
These were the criteria.
One arm, one leg, doesn't matter. You applied the same criteria and you put everybody through the same process.
Yeah.
So it's all about consistency and eliminating people being able to say that their experience was different to somebody else's.
So the reason that I would say that you need a application form is very much around the psychosocial hazards in the workplace, which is the new code of practice. And this is all about, mental health in the workplace, huge costs. So what are we doing to be able to manage and put risks and control in? And I would say it is your responsibility to let an employee know if there are aspects of the work which may impact their mental health. So, for example, I would be saying to them, are you able to work shift work? Are you aware that this role, or would this trigger any mental health or any issues working with vulnerable people, being exposed to domestic violence? Yeah, all of these types of things. Because if you're working in a sector that supports one of the community-based roles, or maybe you work in real estate and you've got to deal with fairly challenging situations when you're going out and doing inspections or dealing with different community groups, then you need to make sure that they've got the resilience and the ability to be able to do that. And that would be we're being really upfront, like these are some of the stresses. You have to be able to work weekends, you have to be able to work shift work, these are the hours, some of these things. So it's a pre-qualification, so they can't say, oh, I came in and then I found out I had to deal with this. I just didn't know, and you therefore triggered my mental health issue with it. So I think, so an application form, just think like when you go to the doctor, you get there early and you fill in a form, an application form is the same sort of thing. Anyway, we'll spend a lot of time on that. We've decided yes, that gets a tick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, contracts. So one of the questions we get asked a lot is this a legal requirement? If I am only employing 1 or 2 people, do I really need to? Or if I've had the same staff for 15 years, do I really need to revisit employment contracts? Is this something important? Or if I only employ casuals, and they're only there for a short period of time, is this something I should have in place?
Well, I think the overarching question there was the first thing that you said, is having a contract of employment a legal requirement? The answer is no. There's nowhere in the legislation that says an employee must be given a contract of employment in that terminology. There's sections in the Fair Work Act that relate to pay and wages and the employer's obligation to keep pay and wages records, etc., and the employee being told certain information. However you tell them is, I guess, your call, but best practice has told us it's easier to put all that information together in one simple contract of employment, letter of engagement, offer of employment. There's lots of different terminologies about it. Is it essential? Yes, it is essential, because the number one cause of conflict and dispute is self-assessment, self-interpretation, and employees making their own version of reality because they've not been told otherwise. So when we're talking about contracts of employment, we're talking about telling the employee what it is going to be like, or what the expectations of the employment relationship are for working with you straight from the get-go.
Yeah, excellent. So if you're reviewing my employment contracts, what would you be looking for?
What would I be looking for? Sorry, we had a question.
I would go to all the questions at the end. Yeah.
Yep. All right. I got it. Now I don't know how to get back. You can do that. What would I be looking for if I was reviewing contracts of employment? There are the fundamentals. So first of all, a base understanding of what does your business do? Are you a legal practitioner, or are you a mechanics workshop with one employee? I want to make sure that the contract of employment that you are providing is fit for purpose for your audience. There is no point giving a 30-page legally written employment contract to somebody who has got basic language and literacy skills, because that is the number. I got an employment contract. I didn't understand what it said.
And it can work against you, because then that could be used like you should have known that this was a document they couldn't get an understanding.
That's right. So fit for purpose. It's got to be fit for purpose. Think about your end audience as to who's reading it, and potentially even do some reality testing with people in that demographic and go, does this actually make sense to you? Then I'm looking for the other fundamentals in terms of what's the commencement date? What is the award that they're covered by? What is their classification under the award? How is their pay rate structured? Are you paying a flat rate? Are you paying a salary? Are you paying wages and penalties? Do they get paid for public holidays? What allowances are you paying? All of those monetary components extracted from the award and articulated in a way that the employee can read that piece of documentation and know exactly what they're going to get paid when they're going to get paid it, so that they don't have to sit there and go, oh, do I get paid penalties for the public holidays?
Or how do I get paid my overtime?
Yeah, because then when they do it and they don't get paid, or the reality hasn't met the expectation that they've had or what's in the contract, then we start to get conflict and we start to get disputes, and then we get people becoming potentially serial pests, asking questions all the time. But they've got every right to ask those questions, and that could have been all avoided if the information was contained in the contract of employment.
Or it's been ambiguous because you haven't put it out and had clarity with it, and therefore they can challenge to say, well, I think, my rate was $40 an hour and I should be getting double time, my $40 an hour for working overtime. And you could be like, but mate, for the last 3 years, we've paid you a flat hourly rate, for your overtime. And now you're suddenly saying that it should be overtime. Oh, well, I didn't check my pay slip. And that's where we get down a really slippery slope when we have those types of situations. So it amazes me how many fancy schmancy contracts we see that seem to have lots of big words and clauses, but they don't even cover the status and whether or not the award and clarification as to how they're going to get paid. I'd say that is like the number. There's all sorts of clauses we can put in contracts. That is so important. What would you not put in a contract?
What would I not put in a contract? I would not put in an individual flexibility agreement attached to a contract.
Because you can't.
Because you can't. Well, you can. Doesn't make them forcible. It's unlawful. It's like driving 80 in a 60 zone. If there's a copper on the side of the road, you will get booked. What would I not include in an employment contract? Replication of policy. Yeah. So if you've got a policy or a sort of an employment handbook, I wouldn't repeat sections, because then if you update the policy, but it's in your contract of employment creates the contract. So it potentially will trump.
So anything that you might potentially want to change, you don't want to put in a contract, because your contract, unless it's mutually agreed, you can't change.
So that put bonuses and KPIs, bonuses, commissions, and KPIs in contracts.
Things like, we'll always pay for your lunch. We'll pay for your lunch. We'll provide you with a vehicle. We'll provide you with a fuel card. Like anything like that. Not saying that you shouldn't do it and you can't do it, but just don't put it in the contract, so that as the business grows or changes or things change, if you want to vary some of those terms, you can.
Unless you're doing a remuneration package that is holistic, inclusive of a vehicle and something else for a higher level position. And there's included unlimited private use, like it really is a monetary,
which then becomes an FBT. So that if you are wanting to include those things, I'd get a bit of advice around it, because they potentially won't serve you. You might have to do it as a remuneration to get the person to come across, but we would always try and do it as a side document. What's the most common mistake you see in contracts?
The most common mistakes is people they put in the award, they put in the classification, but they don't put in the status of employment, whether the employee is full-time, part-time or casual, or they use terminology like permanent casual, temporary part-time, which then sort of muddles the water and muddles the interpretation. But I think sort of, the most common mistakes is that people put things in contracts that have got a very short lifespan. So like I said before, either reiterating policy wording or putting particular KPIs, targets, bonuses, etc., into contracts, which then they go,
it's really hard to move later on.
It's hard to move because you've created that contract based on that custom and precedence, and you've made it very clear that it's an element of the employment relationship, rather than having it in a separate piece of communication that refers to the fact that it is able to challenge us by discretion or whatever the case might be.
What's the silliest thing you've seen in a contract?
I remember reading a contract, and it was a company that was they wanted to be quite innovative and creative and, you know, very out of the box. And they had put a reference in there, we are special and awards don't apply to us. Which I think was code for A, we don't know what the award is, or B, we don't like what the award says. So we're too special. So
we're self-selecting out.
yes, self-selecting. So, and I think that, and let's be honest, you know, when we talk about award coverage, it's hard. It's not, you know, half of the award coverage is easy. You know, it's quite basic. The other half, we've got morphed positions. You know, we've got people that are doing a bit of this and a bit of that, and or they don't fit in that sort of same square box. As a small business, you really have to have a good understanding of which award applies and the classification within the award to which positions.
Oh, I know one of the things that I see, a common mistake that's made, is that people will go, oh, okay, so they get paid $30, therefore I'll put them on this level. So they try and align the wage with the level, which you shouldn't do. You should always get the level with the job requirement, and then they can get paid above. You can really trip yourself up doing it that way. What about if you've had staff who have been with you for a really long period of time? Do you need to review or update or refresh or reissue a contract?
Look, I think that there's two parts to the question. Should you review it from I guess, a legal or a compliance perspective? That's always a good idea, to make sure that there's nothing in your contracts for a particular individual and or going forward, because let's face it, we like to use templates, and we usually pull out a contract that we did for John and we reissue it, change the name and give it to Bob. We're creatures of habit. Sometimes that's what we do. So you do need to be reviewing them for legislative compliance. Like we know the pay secrecy clause stuff has got to be taken out, all of that. But I also think that sometimes if you've not given your employees sort of any correspondence and they started with you 37 years ago, there's part of me that says sometimes it's nice for them to actually get up-to-date correspondence that has got their correct rate of pay, like that confirmation for them. You know, if you've been doing general correspondence, like every year when their wage goes up or when you do a wage increase or etc., you've been communicating with that to them. Otherwise, I think people, they just forget about it, what's in it. And if you want to then go back and refer to a contract that you did 37 years ago, they're not going to remember. So
or there might be some nasty surprises too. Yeah. They're like, oh gosh, I probably should have tidied that up. Cool.
But if you are going to review them, what I would add in is that be open and honest with your employees about why you're reviewing them, because
and what the changes are.
And what the changes are. Complete transparency, because you give somebody a new contract of employment without explanation, without warning, they're usually going to go straight on that combative, like, why are you doing this? What's wrong? Or what's happened, or etc., rather than actually bringing them on the journey with you.
So, and the explanation could be, look, we're just updating, reviewing, should be any surprises, this is what's gone.
And sorry, I do this a lot, don't I? And if you're going to give them a new contract, give them their old contract at the same time.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
You know, so this is what you had. This is what the contract that you had, so that they're not digging around going, what was in it, and self-assessing what was in it. Give them the explanation as to why you're doing it, then give them the draft of the new one.
Yeah, definitely. Consultative.
Yes.
Okay. Job descriptions. So when would these documents be used? Are they important?
If I had to rank them in order of importance, I guess when you're talking about application forms, contracts of employment, job descriptions, I don't think they're as important, but that's just my observation. I do think that they are important, but if I went into an employer and they said, look, I physically only have the capacity to give them two things, and I had to choose either a contract over a job description, I would choose a contract.
Yeah.
If I had to choose an application of employment over a job description, I'd choose the application.
Yeah, I agree. So with the job description, so I've seen there's two reasons for job descriptions. One, I think that it's when people are applying for a role.
Yep.
And it's really good to send them the job description so they've got clarity. businesses I worked in early in my career, it was like it was secret squirrel. Don't share the job description, so don't give it to them before the interview because then they can cheat. Like, seriously, I actually think it's really good if you're able to say this is the role, this is going to be the requirements. The second,
That
and
also goes back to that consistency that we're talking about. You're giving
Yeah.
everybody the same information.
application for job description, this is what it's all going to be about. The other thing is that it helps you even before you advertise the role to check is what do we actually want this person to do, and have we aligned this role and the duties and requirements and responsibilities correctly to the award. So that's a really good thing to do, an award check, to make sure we've got the right classification. The other thing they're really good for, which I think they're underutilized for, is when you're doing the performance review. Because when you go through and do a performance review with someone, you'll often find that 80% of what they do is really good, and it's the 20% that maybe you need to work on for whatever reason. And if you've got the job description, you can actually go, hey, this is your job description, and you're doing really well in this, you're doing well in these areas, and then you can sort of really, it gives you a really good opportunity to reinforce the areas that they are doing really well in, but also pulling attention to areas that you would like them to maybe focus some more attention on. But I agree, they get trumped by a contract in an application form.
Yeah.
But I still think, they are very useful for having transparent communication as to what you expect from the role.
That's right. But if you have your contract of employment and it says, your position is in accordance with the job description attached, and you don't attach it, there's a little bit of a problem, because you're indicating that there is a job description, then you haven't provided it, which then if you get into an argument with the employee about doing your job, well, you had a contractual obligation to provide it and you didn't.
And some people diehards with this, like one of our consultants, Deanna, she would always want a job description to go out of the contract. She's like, you're going to give them a contract, you have to give them the duties that they go with it. She's like, they're not separate documents, then they are, but they need to go together. And, she would always, like I always say, whenever she's dealing with clients, that she doesn't really make it. She's like, you can do it or we can do it, you need to give them the job description.
What I think with job descriptions, the biggest mistake that employers make with job descriptions, I think, is that they have them because potentially somebody told them that they needed to have them. They're never reviewed. They're not meaningful. They're not fit for purpose.
And they have all these wanky terms.
Yeah, real wanky terms. They haven't been reviewed in 10 years. Nobody's signed them or done anything with them. And they're pulled out once in a blue moon because somebody's done something wrong.
What about when you get staff saying, I don't have to do that because it's not on my job description?
Oh, I love that. It's one of my all-time favorites. Every job description, there's this magic clause, and it's only magic if you include it. All right. This magic little sentence that says any other duty is directed. Reasonable duty. Like, if you've got somebody who is employed as a cleaner and you ask them to reprogram the software, that's not reasonable. They don't have the skills, they don't have the capabilities that you're aware of anyway. But it is in terms of reasonableness and being relevant to the role, and being open and honest with the person. Like, there has been occasions, Phoebe, where you may have said to me, or you should have said to me, I know it's not in your job description, but I've forgotten my underwear from the gym. Can you go to Target and get me some underwear because I don't have any? And be honest, that's not in my job description.
It's a reasonable duty.
I'm more likely to be accommodating, knowing that you're aware of that. But if they're going to be really combative and argumentative about it, I would suggest it's probably a different issue as to what's actually in the job description.
Okay, next one, induction, orientation. So time is money. Like, how much time orientation, and what's your opinion? Is it a waste of time? Is it something really important?
I think I could probably get hung, drawn and quartered for my answer for this one. I mean, I think inductions and orientation is probably one of the most important periods that you're going to have with your employees. But I also fully understand that time is money, and it does take time and effort to go through and properly induct employees. I think you really have to look at what your organization, what fundamentally drives your business. What are your values? of the organization? What do you want to achieve? And if things like workplace culture, integration, collaboration, etc., are really important to your organization, that really does need to, that aligns
to do an induction there.
that aligns to a much more substantive induction process than an organization who's not headed down that path. Bare minimum, it's the basic things, you know, like what does an employee need to know when they're coming in? Considering that you've got your contract of employment, so the terms and conditions and the employment relationship sort of stuff is all there, all right? Right from the get-go, when they walk in the gate on that front door, you know, I encourage employees to go out and just essentially do the orientation checklist based on walking into your business. Where do I park my car? Where do I not park my car? Where do I put my lunch?
Oh my gosh, politics, particularly if you're down on the Sunshine Coast with car parking.
Yeah,
It's
where
not
do,
an issue.
where do I put my lunch? You know, if I put my stuff in a drawer, does that mean somebody else is going to like eat it in the fridge? Am I
probably
taking
will.
over? Yeah,
I cross boundaries
you do.
with that.
And I would educate our staff that Phoebe doesn't cross boundaries, but if you say to Phoebe, you've eaten all my apples, she will go buy you more. It's okay. Where are the bathrooms? You know, the basic fundament. Do we have a microwave? Do we have toaster?
Is there a cut protocol?
Is there a cup protocol? Absolutely. Is there a chair protocol? Like if you've got hot desks and you're moving around, all that sort of stuff. Where do I put my lunchbox? Where do I put my bag? Going over things like, are phones allowed in the workplace? Do they have to be stored? Introduction of people is also critically important. That's the nice things to have, the warm and fuzzy bits, as we call it, which makes people feel welcomed, and it prevents people walking around like deers in the headlights going, I'm not sure who I should talk to, what I should do, or where I should be. The other element is obviously then your workplace health and safety, which is legislatively compliant. You've got to do some form of induction with your employees in relation to things like, you know, your fire exit, what's your fire and evacuation plan.
We had this was years ago, we had a person who had a chainsaw accident. They cut their hand quite badly on their first day, and they weren't wearing safety gloves, they weren't wearing the PPE. And I think it was an apprentice as well. And the business got caned through work cover, went through common law because they went through a tender or something like that. And they got absolutely smashed at common law, which is, you know, covered by your work cover, but it's never a nice thing to have to go through and impacts a premium because they hadn't been given even any sort of safety. So it's really hard though, because you can't overload and overwhelm people when they start. So look, I am a huge believer in where possible emailing the person their contract, their job description, and a staff handbook, which should cover off on some of your workplace health and safety.
Yeah.
So at least from a legal compliance, it has got some basic, like you must wear PPE, you know, beware of slips and trips, reporting any hazards, you know, it's going to cover off on some of those really basics. I then agree completely when people come in, it's like, where's the toilet, what's the cup, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then I think the actual orientation induction, I think that you'll get more bang for your buck if you maybe do it a bit over time.
Absolutely.
So, you know, we had Tiffany join us recently. For those of you that haven't met, we're very excited to have Tiffany down, and she's sitting behind the orange blocks in the computer.
Behind that HR
logo. Put your camera on so you can give everyone a wave, Tiffany. She'll be like, okay, I'm out of my comfort zone now.
She might.
She told us she was going to listen to this. Maybe we've just called her.
It wasn't in her job description.
That wasn't her job. Oh no, there she is.
Hi, Tiffany.
So when Tiffany first started, she started, and hopefully we did. I won't ask her in case she gives me the wrong answer. Hopefully we did a good orientation when she first started with some of those basics, but then a couple of weeks later when I was down there, I did more training with them where I really talked about more about, you know, how we like our staff to think and the culture and our expectations and our customer service. And I think if I'd given that to her on the first day, it would have just been like, where's the toilets again? Like,
Yeah.
what time do we finish?
I think, you know, with workplace health and safety is one of those things where I think that you really do learn by mistakes. Unfortunately.
I don't know that workplace health and safety will agree with you.
No. But I think it's that continuous improvement.
Yeah.
You know, it's the opportunity to improve what we're doing from what we have potentially done wrong. So if we're talking orientation or induction for your employees, going back to your apprentice that's using a chainsaw, I would be thinking about the absolute fundamentals that I need from the employee from day one. What do I need them to sort of be doing maybe 2-3 weeks in? What do I need them to be able to be doing, 4-5 weeks in? Because in a perfect world, if you've got employees that are using machinery, you probably want to try and build in some verification of competence that show me that you know how to use the chainsaw.
Well, we would normally have in those types of industries in the handbook that they need to receive some training before they use equipment for the first time. So it's their responsibility to say that.
Yeah.
Because I agree. I think that's super important.
Because even though employees have said that they've done things before, we all know that people may be telling porcupines and they may not have used your brands of equipment or etc. So I think it's one of those safety net things for employers to make sure that part of your orientation and your induction is including how we use our equipment.
I also think, some of the worst industrial reaction that we have seen employees take against the employer have been for employees who are quite new to a business. Casuals who have come in, all that people, and they don't like it, and they've got there's no depth of relationships there. And they're really happy to take the employer to Fair Work through to court if necessary to try and get as much as they can by saying I wasn't trained, I wasn't shown, I was bullied on my first day. And like if I only been there for a short period of time, it is quite hard to show what you have put in place with it. So you do need to have some awareness about that.
Yeah. A little training induction checklist.
Yeah, really basic. Staff handbook, sign that you've received it, your responsibility to read it, just something is important. Okay, let's talk policies. Woo!
No.
Insubordination.
I don't say no.
Bullying.
So go back. What do we want to talk about policies for? What is your question?
No, my question is this just like, seriously, it's 2023. Do I need a policy around bullying, or should it just be common sense that bullying is not something we should be doing in the workplace?
Have you not seen the generations as they've moved over the last 10 years? And this foreign concept of common sense, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about there. What is that? There are some policies where I think, yes, absolutely, the employer, and look, we're talking small business today.
Yeah, and I do see businesses over politicizing.
Oh yeah, it reminds me of the day when my mum and dad had the encyclopedia salesman come around and we had the big wooden bookcase and the 26 volumes, and the only one they got looked at was the anatomy one with the see-through pages. The rest of it you wouldn't have a clue. But we had the encyclopedias. Yeah. That was the important bit. So policies can be a little bit the same. There can be policy for policy's sake, but then do people actually read, understand, distribute? Well, I think that's a two-pronged question, because policies are only ever going to be as good as the employer's direction for them. If the employer's got a set of policies and they don't know what's in them, then you can't expect the employers to know what's in them. So there are some things, like, so you've got your little list here, kitchen cleaning duties. We don't need a policy for that. We might need a roster on the wall, but that's not a policy. Uniform and grooming, potentially you don't need a whole policy for that. It could just be in your employment contract. It can be in your employment contract. It also can be in your employment handbook. Yeah, one or the other. You don't need those.
The problem when you have it in both, so when you have it in the contract and you have a standalone policy and you have it in the handbook, is what we will see is that someone will update one but not the others, and so then you start to get inconsistencies. So it's a dangerous sign. You're better to actually think, okay, whereabouts am I best to have this, and just have it in the one place, and then if necessary refer back to that central source of truth for it. Yeah,
and think about your end user. Where would they go to the source of truth? So what have we told them is in existence in the workplace? And that's where you sort of want to you want to try and make sure that your employees know where their documentation is.
I still think bullying policy is one that you.
I
need.
was coming back to that.
All right.
I was going through the ones on your
I
list
just-
here that
I
I
just-
don't think we need.
All right.
Um,
Oh, what about annual leave? Do you need a policy on that?
you don't need one.
I don't need one. I've seen
Unless,
some people have these long and complicated policies, and it's just all exactly what's in the NES.
yeah, we've now got this thing though called the National Employment Standard, which is part of the Fair Work Act.
Yeah.
Which is, we never used to have that up until 2010 when we got Fair Work. Policies have been around since David was a boy, the concept of policies. The NES has, in my opinion, diminished the requirements for employers to have set rules about that.
But
But
already there.
there might be some things that you do want to have in place, which you don't need a full policy or standalone policy. You just put in your employee handbook, things like your notification, like of annual leave, tell us. at
4
least
weeks in
4 weeks,
advance,
whatever.
or whatever. Yeah.
The one thing that gets missed in policies relating to annual leave and sometimes in employment handbooks is the employer being able to say you must use your annual leave before you can take leave without pay.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're moving into a generation of employees.
Now
that-
you're doing our handbooks. I hope you're taking note on that.
Yes, we're moving into a generation of the workforce where money is not as high an influence. It is, but it's not. And people are happy to take a leave without payday.
Which leaves it's a pain in the ass for the business because you're not
Yeah.
getting down your leave liability, and you.
That's right. So then could be
You put someone
taking
away for the day.
long
lost
weekends
productivity.
for, 20 weekends of the year.
Not that you have to approve it, but.
No, but employees, they get really upset when their leave's not approved. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Never noticed.
no, it's because you've never declined my leave.
It's true.
So leave policies.
Oh, the other thing with annual leave, sorry, is if you've got times of shutdown. So, for example, up here in Far North Queensland, if you work in tourism and hospitality, they'll often have a not shut down, a period, a blackout period rather. So they might say that you can't take leave between the months of June and August because that's a really busy time up here. So they try and direct you to take it at a quieter time. And they may also have times of shutdown, which there's been some changes of that, isn't there?
All of the award is now actually part of the it's part of all awards. They changed the shutdown. No, they didn't change. They've clarified and included a consistent shutdown clause in all of this.
That's why Deanne's here. She knows that. Yeah. So if there's, so for example, if you are closing the office over a Christmas period, so everyone can take leave, you need to have that notification through to the staff. And that
Yeah.
would be something that, again, maybe not a policy, just putting it in a handbook places the need for a policy.
Yep. Code of conduct. I don't think you specifically need a code of conduct, but again, a standalone code of conduct, depending on what your business is and what you want to portray to your employees. But I think that standard comments in terms of your employment handbook about expected workplace behaviours, Toolbox talks about workplace behaviours, etc., would cover off on that. I wouldn't need a standalone.
Well, one thing
policy.
that I have seen is that people have the code of conduct in the handbook of standalone policy, and they'll say disciplinary action may occur up to and including termination of employment, and they'll have a whole list of things, late for work, swearing, taking drugs, blah, 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 blah. And then if a staff member does any of those things, they say, oh, we can terminate their employment now because it says in our contract of employment, in our code of conduct that we can. Unfortunately, the law is always going to trump what you've got in your policy. So even if you say, I'm going to be terminating you because of this, if you haven't followed Fair Work guidelines and processes, then you're going to become unstuck potentially. So have some awareness with that.
Yeah. One thing that you've got here on your list is, you mentioned it before, I've circled it. Is bullying. I'm going to extend this out now to bullying and sexual harassment. This is one area where I would say all employers, regardless of size, no, they're two separate things. They can be. Regardless of your size, we've got to the point now with the changes in the Fair Work Act from 2022 as a result of the Me Too movement and the Respect Me movement through Parliament. Sexual harassment particularly, and this is the driving force. Bullying is there, sexual harassment is there, but sexual harassment is sort of just trumping right at the moment, but we can bring bullying along for the ride. Sexual harassment,
Following close.
yes, is prohibited. So that's all well and good to say it's unlawful to basically commit acts of sexual harassment in the workplace. More so to the point then the employer now it's labelled that the employer or the PCBU, because it's linking back to workplace health and safety, has a positive duty to eliminate the behaviour. So that it's now no longer enough to have a little statement in an employment handbook. You need to have those standalone policies, particularly for sexual harassment and bullying, and they need to extend out to what should an employee do if they are sexually harassed, not just within the workplace, but outside the workplace. You know, they can go to the police, you've got to actually factor in.
And outside of the workplace in a work-related situation,
where can they get support outside of the
I see
workplace?
what you mean. Yeah.
So they should report it inside, but what else should they do?
Yeah.
Or what else can they do? So a policy absolutely is going to be a necessity. A risk assessment is going to be a necessity. Regular training with your employees. When I say regular training, that's not just once when they start. It does need to be at least annually, in my opinion, and probably even 6 monthly toolbox talks just as refreshers, posters up around the workplace, all of those sorts of things. Because otherwise, you as the employer, if somebody like, you know, they do a PP.
Yeah, that doesn't make me sure.
Okay, right. So that's good. So that's an act of sexual harassment. What have you done to prevent me doing that? That's the question.
Yeah.
And then it's your liability to make sure that you have done everything humanly possible to prevent it happening, because otherwise you are then liable as the business owner, and you've got enough headaches and enough worries and enough liability without this being another one.
This is a really tricky one because, you know, overt sexual harassment and bullying is pretty easy. It's easy to see and it's kind of easy to deal with. It's all those subtleties. It's people coming around and giving you shoulder massages and you feeling a bit uncomfortable about it. It's not being invited to meetings, which you feel you should from a bullying perspective. That and you know, part of the onus is on the person then to speak up and say, hey, I'm not happy, I don't feel appropriate, you know, I'm being treated in a fair and reasonable manner. So that's a big topic, and you know, we'll be doing some more work on that with employers coming forward, but that gives a big green tick.
Big green tick.
Get
but
those in place.
Don't just run in and Google the policy, because you can Google a policy that's going to be really onerous and put too much emphasis on things that you can't do and things that you have just no capability of even
needs to
getting
be
to.
practical for your business.
Fit for
bespoke
purpose.
for your business.
Fit for purpose. That's going to tie in very shortly to the managing psychosocial risks and the new code of practice and the risk assessment. So there's going to be a lot of work in this space for employers to do.
Yeah.
But we're here to help.
Social media.
Oh, social media. Look, I'm getting.
It's never a problem until it's a problem.
Yeah, I'm getting to the point now where I think with the level of impact of social media, it's bordering on a big green tick of having a separate policy, like, you know,
or in a handbook, like it's,
but a bit more extended. Like, you know, I think of some of the questions that I've had recently, you know, a termination for an employee who was doing TikTok videos. They've been told that they shouldn't have been doing TikTok videos
while at
work. Their response was, but I covered the logo of the shirt with my hair, so that's okay. Forgetting the fact that they were on a mine site and you could see the security access panel in the background and people punching in codes. Anyway, but the other one, which was, it was a after school hours care. And they found out that 2 of their after school hours care, this Catholic environment, were members of OnlyFans.
Oh, right.
Tell me an employer 5 years ago or even 2 years ago who thought about OnlyFans being an issue in the workplace.
True.
But again, you have to look at your business. You've got to look at, you know, are you in childcare? Are you working with young and vulnerable people? Is there going to be a connection? What are your acceptable boundaries with social media? Because it's changing every single day. What we were worried about Facebook and Instagram before.
Just go to the next level now.
Now we're going next level. So it's a half a green tick. You can put it in your handbook if you've got enough wording about it.
Qualifying period.
No, it goes in your contract.
How long should the qualifying period be?
Well, that would depend on if you're a small business and assuming everybody here is under the 15 cap. So less than 15 employees, 12 months.
So we normally put in our contracts the qualifying period as per national employment standards, or
That's
as
under the
per
Fair Work
Fair
Act.
Work, under the Fair Work Act. So that means that if you go under or over, because if you're over 15 staff, you count, it's going to be 12 months. 6 months rather. So if you just put it, it's going to be as per the Act, then you're sort of covered with that. Don't put 3 months.
No,
It's just annoying when you come to us at 4 months or 5 months and you want us to terminate it and you've got a contract in there that says it's 3 months. I'm like,
it just creates more obstacles than need to be there. That needs to be there.
and we've put some things in there, which we probably covered already, some workplace health and safety things in there. You know, everyone needs to have some workplace health and safety, you know, slips and trips, sun safety, driving, good ergonomics for setting up your computer,
And
you
your
know,
cars, vehicles.
yeah, because you get carpet tunnel syndrome, all of those types of things. It doesn't need to be a lot, but there just needs to be something in there
As a starting.
as a starting point. Then depending upon the industry, you know, then elevates as to whether or not you need safe work method statements, etc. Okay, moving along. Performance reviews, are these important?
I say yes, they are, but only if they're done in the intent that they're there for. So performance reviews are a really good opportunity to have a conversation that is purely related to their performance, not just oh, you did a great job on that in the hallway in a 5-minute conversation. It gives you a really good
But
opportunity.
you evaluate yourself and I'll see whether I agree with it.
Yeah, that's true. A good opportunity to review the position description. Has the position changed? Has the classification changed of the employee? Has their duties, responsibilities, authority changed in what they're doing? But it also demonstrates consistency across everybody. You're having the same conversations. It's a really good chance to again check in with their mental well-being, tying back into your positive duty of care because you're having that same conversation with everybody. But if you're just going to use it as a tick and flick and go, yep, you're great, you're great, you're great, and tell people that they're great when you know that they're not really great because you don't want to have a difficult conversation or you don't want to have a conversation that might be uncomfortable, don't do them.
Or don't do it and say great things about them and then come to us 2 weeks later and say, I want to terminate the person. And don't laugh because that happens. And I'm like,
More than we would like to admit.
yeah. So, look, I think performance, if you're paying someone 50, 60, 70 plus $1,000 a year and you have not got time to sit down and spend an hour talking to the person to really talk about how they're going, if there's some areas of improvement, if they've got any frustrations, to give them some accolades and, you know, tell them what they're doing great, then there's something wrong with your business model. Like, you know, every staff member deserves a little bit of one-on-one time. And it's not all about just telling them what they've done wrong. It's about also telling them what they've done well.
And succession planning.
Feedback from them. Yeah, succession planning, you know, professional development planning. And, you know, professional development's not necessarily going and sending them to expensive courses. It might be just doing some cross-training or getting some mentoring or organising some books for them, you know, to read about an area that they're interested in. So, you know, I feel it's like, and I use this analogy all the time, it's like buying an expensive car but never bothering to put it in for a service. Like, yeah, sure, it might keep going for a while, but if you keep on top of your services and you keep looking after it, you're going to get a much better result. And if things are starting to go a little bit pear-shaped, well, you're going to get on top of it faster. And so, you know, Do you have to have them? No. Is it better not to have them than have a poorly done one? Yes, but I think that you need to take a good hard look at yourself as a manager if you're not at a point where you're employing staff and you're not able to give performance reviews. So there. Yeah.
Does that mean mine's due?
Pardon?
Does that mean mine is due?
We did yours.
Yeah.
We did yours again. We
But,
had breakfast.
but I didn't get a pay rise.
Ah, yes. So do you have to link performance reviews to pay rises?
No, you do not.
I think sometimes I think it's better not to. Because I think that if you do, then the person, it really then becomes a sales job. Like if I'd said, Dee, we're looking at your pay, and well, she knows we are and we want to do your review, she should feel the need to want to talk herself up because she wants to get a pay increase. I'd rather let her be able to have the performance review and be quite vulnerable, go, oh, I'm really struggling with this, or I'm not good at that, she can say that. But
yeah, but also creating the expectation. If your employees just think that the performance review exercise is a way to get a pay increase, you're missing the mark of what a performance review is there to do. So, you have a practice of mine. My review was done in December over breakfast. It was good. It was nice breakfast too. But usually any sort of salary review that you may do as a director is usually done financial year based. So you don't have to link them together. You can if you wish, but just be mindful about setting a custom and practice or an expectation.
So just while we're talking about salary reviews too, I think there's a couple of things to consider here. One, you've got to meet your award requirements. So if you're sitting on the award with your staff, you're going to have to do that. And that's going to be for the first full pay after the 1st of July that will come out. And don't ask me what the increase is going to be this year because we really don't know. It's going to be somewhere between
2 and 6.
Oh, I was going to say 3 and 7. I reckon it will flush out around 5.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't know. Maybe that might be too high. I don't hold me to that at all. Anyway, so there's that. Then there is the
Can't see your face.
Oh, then there's the pay increase, which is because the positions change. So this person over the last 12 months are starting to step up into a more senior role or doing more different responsibilities, or they've got more staff reporting to them or whatever it's going to be. So we actually have to realign them. Now that may be a classification realignment, or it might just be a market value realignment. This is what this role was probably worth 12 months ago, but this is what it is now. So we're going to change their salary by $5,000 or whatever it's going to be. If it's not that, then I still recommend that every year you look at doing at minimum some sort of CPI, even if it's not aligned with the award. Because if people go, oh, they're paid way above the award and we, don't do any increase, before you know it, you've gone through 5 years and they're way behind, and then you have to do a great big hike to get them back up.
Yeah.
So even if you're just increasing their pay by a couple of percent, 2 or 3%, to keep it relevant, particularly in times of high inflation like it is at the moment, I think that's super, super important to do that.
Yep.
Okay. So if it is my business.
Are you actually going to
read? Yeah, I'm going to read that.
Okay.
So if it is my business, can I terminate someone if I think they are a lazy dickhead?
Well, you can.
My business.
It's your business. You can do whatever it is you like.
Yeah.
You can drive 80 in a 60 zone. And that's fundamentally, that's what the crux of the question comes to. You can do what you want to do in your business, considering the long-term implications. Sometimes there's short-term pain for long-term gain. But at the end of the day, if you punch and pay, as we say, if you're going to drive 80 in a 60 zone, you do so knowing that you can be fined for it, or there could be a consequence. So can you terminate somebody? Yeah, absolutely. Walk in, sack them, but be prepared for the consequence. If you want to avoid the consequence, or if you want to put in some risk mitigation and minimize the impact of a termination, then there is best practice. Do you have to give them 3 warnings? No, you don't have to give them 3 warnings. That's not in legislation anywhere, but you do have to demonstrate.
It's just around so much. Every week I must hear people say, oh, but we've got to go through the 3 warnings.
No, you've got to be able to reasonably demonstrate that you undertook disciplinary action in a reasonable way, meaning that you have told the employee what the issue was, you gave them the opportunity to respond, you gave them the opportunity to have a support person, you told them what was not acceptable, and you gave them the opportunity to improve. So if you give somebody a warning letter because they have done whatever, and you terminate them the next day because you thought they were going to do it, then you haven't given them a reasonable opportunity to improve.
Or what I like is when someone does something wrong and they're like, I'm just going to give them a warning the next day. And they write up the warning and they haven't gone through the process correctly. So that there's two things, be it for a warning or be it for a termination.
Or disciplinary action.
Or disciplinary action, yeah. One, there has to be a good cause or a reason for it, why you're doing it. And generally there is, because we, by nature, we don't like conflict. We don't like having to do these things. The second thing is that we have to go through a fair and reasonable process. And that process is give them notification that this is a topic you're going to discuss with them. Don't just ambush them. Give them an opportunity to bring a support person with them to that meeting and give them an opportunity to provide their side of the story or their and listen to it. And, you know, it's just incredibly important that you go through that process.
That's it. You can still get to the same outcome, but you have to. Again, I always say, I know it's hard because it's your business and it's your name on the front of the building and you're the one who's taking all the risk and liability. But, you know, put yourself in the employee's shoes. You know, if this was your child that was coming into this meeting with you, how would you react if you undertook it in the way that you're going to undertake it? And if the answer is, I'd probably stand up and punch me in the face, maybe rethink about how you're going to do that undertake and carry out that meeting.
What about those employers that say, but they know what's wrong because I've told them 1,000 times, haven't documented it, but I've told them, they know.
Yeah, it's like having children. You know, you can tell them 1,000 times. It's not until you disconnect the Wi-Fi that they actually take you seriously. So I do. I bring the modem to work if my children annoy me. Put it in my car. So yes, I get it. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes consistency. But if you, and I always look at situations. If I was representing the employee, that's my reality test. If I was representing the employee, what would I pick out of the process? And that's usually where our loopholes are. So if somebody's told me 1,000 times, automatically I'm going to say, no, you didn't. You didn't tell me that. And then you can't demonstrate that it did. So you can tell them till you're blue in the face, but you're going to keep telling them till they're blue in the face until you actually take some more formal form of action with them. You know, even if it is after you have a verbal conversation, quick email maybe, like it's not ideal, but you know, an email, something, you know, further to our conversation today, you know, these are the areas that we're really don't like, these are the areas that you're struggling with, or this is the behavior that you did. In future, can you just It's something to say, at least the conversation was had. You know, but if you're going to go to the effort of doing that, you might as well go to the next effort of.
And I get it. You know, some businesses say the risk of having this person remaining in our business is too high because they did something. We just need to. But you know, if we can try and get as much process, so at least put them on stand down and give them a show clause and give them an opportunity to respond and then terminate it. You know, something's better than nothing with it. And you know, the risk is if you're just prepared for a termination, that there'll be some sort of action. And you have to be like the unfair dismissal maximum penalty is 6 months. But adverse action, you know, that can be unlimited. We had a really interesting one the other day where we had someone who said they've been terminated. They felt not because of the fact that they weren't working at work and there was a whole lot of issues with that. They were physically doing other things while at work, but because 2 years prior they'd said that they might get pregnant in a couple of years' time.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to employees being able to say stuff and mount an argument, not because it happened, but because they can. You know, so it's really important to try and stem off. You know, I hate to say it, but I think we're getting more Americanized by the day. Employees are no longer fearful of putting complaints in and suing employers and taking them to the cleaners or whatever else. And the legislation makes it so easy for them to do it.
And said that, it does frustrate me too when people say, oh, I'm not going to put on stuff because there's so much trouble, I can't get rid of them if they're no good. You can, but you just have to be brave and upfront and use a good process with it. But 100%,
or get some help to do it.
Yeah, get some help to do it, because you know, if a stuff is not a good fit for your business, no issue. We absolutely can address that, but we need to do so using a good process around it, rather than just fly off their handle and tell them to go get effed and then feel surprised when they put a complaint in.
All right, last question here.
Top
As we're done.
tips for managing staff performance.
I only have one tip, consistency.
Oh, that's good. As long as it's good, don't be consistently bad.
Well, of course, we're not going to be consistently bad, consistently good. So consistency in how you do it, when you do it, and do for your best employee what you would do for your worst employee and vice versa.
Mhm.
So if you wouldn't chip your best employee for being 5 minutes late, why would you chip your worst employee?
That's a good point. Yeah, fair point.
Yeah. So I guess, we do like to talk, and we're quite good at talking, but we hope that that's probably gone through enough of those fundamentals.
So my top tip.
What's your top tip?
My top tip is probably to be brave. That if something's not working with one of your staff, don't put your head in the sand, don't try and hide. Actually, when you're not feeling too heightened into emotive, try and deal with it in an appropriate manner. I think that's probably my top tip.
Yep.
With it, because we're really good at, mind playing out, overthinking it, whinging to other people, whereas in fact we probably just need to address it with the person.
And sometimes a little bit of honesty and vulnerability goes a long way.
And be prepared that you might get some feedback you don't like as well, and but that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a couple of questions.
So I guess for people who don't want to stay around for the questions, that's the main content. So if you do have to leave us,
But
obviously
I've got-
acutely aware of your time.
If you would like to, I don't know if
That's okay.
how that works. If you would like to catch up and discuss anything that is today, I'm just like, all right, look at us. We have a
the
QR.
technology.
We went to another webinar. I went to some session the other day, and they had this event, and I'm like, oh my, could we have that too? That sounds really cool. If you would like to catch up and have a meeting, we always do initial consultations free of charge. Happy to have a chat to you. We're very approachable. It's really important to us that we are a good fit for your business, and that we provide the advice that's going to work for your business as well. So please feel free to click on the QR code and make an appointment, and I would love to hear from you. Or, if you can't do QR codes, you can always email and phone me. I'm still happy with it. Couple of questions that we've got. Why do so many business owners don't reply to applicants, avoiding this pitfall? This was early on
About the application.
Yeah, I think it's really rude actually not to respond to an application. Yeah, I don't think that you are avoiding any pitfall or getting sued for discrimination or anything by not responding. I just think you're being rude. I think all you need to do is send an email to say, sorry, you're unsuccessful.
Yeah, and most of, the Seek platforms, Indeed platforms will help you manage that, and just send default emails. A default email is better than no email, because at the end of the day, you also have to be mindful of the fact that these employees are applying to your business, and whether or not you think they're a tire kicker or not is irrelevant. You want to create the look and feel of that you are a great place to work, and even though they may not have got the job, but you can still give them a good experience.
Exactly. We've got, does an employee handbook, or is an employee handbook a similar thing to having policies? Yeah, it is. So for a business like ours, we don't have any standalone policies here, but we have a staff handbook.
So it's a simplified version. I don't even know if they can see that, which is pretty and is tailored to a business, but covers off in simple language what most policies would do.
Yeah, and those it can stand together, or it can, in most businesses, your employee handbook is going to be fine. There may be a requirement for some extra policies, so I don't like additional policies. I just think they're boring dust keepers, and I'm not saying.
Yes.
And the handbook's really good because you can give it to someone or email it when they start. You can have a copy in the office, and you can reissue it to everybody on an annual basis, so you're keeping it fresh. Is it required to increase pay each year if I'm still above the award? No, it's not. You don't have to. However, if one of the attractions of working for your business is because you do provide above award payment, and you don't give an increase, and you can fall behind, bearing in mind that there is some inflation. However, if someone's, yes, you may talk.
Oh, excellent. If you still need to make sure that you're actually doing the calculation to ensure that you're above the award.
Fair point.
So you can't actually just assume because you're above the award last year that you are going to be above.
No,
the
no, no.
award.
I like the people that pay above the award and you go, oh, which award? And they go, I don't know.
Yeah, those ones there. Also, check your contract of employment. If you've actually referenced in there that you pay 5% above the award, you kind of need to keep that.
Don't put that in the contract.
No.
That's
But
lovely.
if you have, and it's still there, that may impact your pay increases.
Yeah, excellent. What is the situation if an employee has given a long notice period to you and then they start to underperform and become difficult? Can you terminate them prior to notice period?
You can, but you
You have to tell them at the. I rang up about this for an employer once and spoke to Fair Work about it. So when they hand in their notice and they tell you that they want to terminate their employment, at that stage, you can say, will you just give the notice period, and you don't have to accept the extended period of time. If you accept it and say, yep, no problem, you kind of have to see out the notice period.
Yes,
But you could performance manage them.
or you can actually have an open and honest conversation about them, sit down with them and saying, look, we noticed A, B, C, and D, understand that you are leaving, but, have you checked out? Are you committed to work through to the end of this notice period? Because if you're not, tell us now. Happy for you to leave. Tell us now.
Shake hands, pay you up till today.
That's right. But if you are committed, this is what we're seeing. This is the expectations. But you want to try and avoid turning it into a termination, because that's just always going to open up risk for the employer. But yes, it is absolutely a possibility.
At the beginning. The other thing that some employers will do is they'll put people on gardening leave through their probationary period, but that's going to be a cost.
Through their notice period, not probation period.
Notice, not probation.
Yes.
Notice period. Okay, that looks like it is the end of the questions. So
I feel like we've well and truly used our word quota.
yeah, I think we have too. Hopefully it's been helpful. Hopefully you've learned something. And
Hopefully
please
just one thing. That's all you need to pick up.
take
Just
one thing away. Absolutely. Or hopefully it's just reconfirmed all the things you knew.
Maybe.
Brilliant. Excellent. Have a fabulous day.
Thanks, guys. See you
Bye-bye.
soon.